A song comes on, one you haven't heard in years, and within seconds, something strange happens in your chest. It isn't quite happiness, it isn't quite sadness either. It's both, tangled together so tightly you can't pull them apart. Why does remembering something good also make you ache a little? And the real answer is far stranger than simple sentimentality. Think about the last time nostalgia hit you out of nowhere. Maybe it was a smell. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe it was walking past a building that used to mean something. In that instant, you weren't just remembering information. You were reliving a feeling. And that feeling had two conflicting currents running through it at once. Warmth for what happened. A quiet loss for the fact that it's over. Most people just accept this as how nostalgia feels, without ever asking why it's built this way in the first place.
Here's the part that should surprise you. For most of modern history, nostalgia wasn't considered a warm feeling at all. It was considered a disease. In 1688, a Swiss medical student named Johannes Hofer coined the term nostalgia by combining the Greek words for homecoming and pain. He wasn't describing a pleasant wistfulness. He was describing Swiss soldiers stationed far from home who developed genuine physical symptoms, including fatigue, loss of appetite, and in severe cases, symptoms so debilitating that some doctors believed patients could die from it. For roughly 200 years afterward, nostalgia was treated in medical literature as a legitimate illness, something to be cured, not cherished.
So how did an actual diagnosed disease become one of the most universally cherished emotional experiences of modern life? The shift starts with psychologist Konstantin Setikides, whose research at the University of Southampton has spent decades systematically re-examining what nostalgia actually does inside the mind. Setikides and his colleagues found that nostalgia is not, in fact, primarily a sad emotion, despite its bittersweet edge. In study after study, participants who deliberately engaged in nostalgic reflection reported increased feelings of social connectedness, higher self-esteem, and a stronger sense that their life had meaning and continuity. Nostalgia, in Setikides' framing, functions less like a wound being reopened and more like a psychological resource, something the mind reaches for specifically during moments of loneliness, uncertainty, or transition. This alone reframes the entire emotion. Nostalgia isn't punishing you for losing something good, it's handing you a tool to cope with the fact that you did. But that still doesn't explain the ache. If nostalgia is genuinely a resource, why does it hurt at all?
This is where the research of psychologist Christine Batcho becomes essential. Batcho has spent years studying what's called nostalgia proneness, essentially why some people lean into nostalgic reflection far more than others, and what separates a healthy relationship with the past from an unhealthy one. Her work found that the bittersweetness itself is doing psychological work. The sadness component isn't a design flaw, it's what gives nostalgia its emotional weight and its credibility. A memory that felt effortlessly happy with zero sense of loss attached wouldn't carry the same meaning. It's precisely because something mattered enough to miss that the memory feels significant at all. The pain is proof that the good part was real.
Batcho's research also found that nostalgia proneness correlates with how people cope with change. People who engage with nostalgia in a healthy way tend to use it as an anchor, a stable reference point that helps them adapt to new circumstances without feeling like they've lost their sense of self in the process. In this light, the ache inside nostalgia isn't the emotion malfunctioning, it's the emotion doing exactly what it evolved to do, marking certain memories as worth protecting by attaching a small, deliberate cost to remembering them. There's a third piece to this puzzle, and it comes from psychologist Clay Routledge, whose research has focused heavily on nostalgia's role in giving people a sense of meaning, particularly during existential distress. Routledge's studies found that inducing nostalgia in participants measurably increased their sense that life is meaningful and reduced the psychological impact of thoughts about death and uncertainty. In his framing, nostalgia works almost like a psychological bridge. It connects your present self to a version of you that existed in a specific, cherished moment, reminding you that your life has continuity, narrative, and worth, even when the present feels uncertain or difficult. Now put all three pieces together and the bittersweet architecture of nostalgia stops looking accidental and starts looking remarkably well engineered. Sedekide shows that nostalgia boosts connectedness and self-esteem specifically when you need it most. Batcho shows that the sadness inside nostalgia is what gives the memory its credibility and weight, marking it as something worth protecting. Routledge shows that nostalgia anchors your sense of meaning by linking your present self to a version of you who mattered. None of these functions would work nearly as well as a purely happy emotion. A memory that felt only good would be pleasant, but forgettable? It's the ache that makes you actually stop, feel it, and let it mean something.
This is why nostalgia so often gets triggered by things you didn't consciously choose to remember. A specific smell, a particular chord progression, a stranger wearing the same cologne someone once wore. These triggers bypass your rational filtering and hit something older and more automatic. A system built specifically to grab your attention and say, "This mattered. Don't let it slide by unnoticed." The bittersweetness is the tag your brain attaches to memories it has decided are worth the emotional cost of revisiting.
Think about how this plays out during major life transitions. People report the strongest waves of nostalgia not during stable, comfortable periods, but during moves, breakups, career changes, and other moments of disruption, exactly when Sedikity's research suggests the mind reaches for nostalgia as a resource. The timing isn't a coincidence. Nostalgia surges precisely when your sense of identity feels least stable, offering a psychological handhold rooted in a version of your life that felt solid and known. Think about how this plays out during major life transitions. People report the strongest waves of nostalgia not during stable, comfortable periods, but during moves, breakups, career changes, and other moments of disruption, exactly when Sedikity's research suggests the mind reaches for nostalgia as a resource. The timing isn't a coincidence. Nostalgia surges precisely when your sense of identity feels least stable, offering a psychological handhold rooted in a version of your life that felt solid and known.
So the ache you feel when an old song plays isn't your brain malfunctioning, and it isn't proof that your present life is somehow lacking. It's a finely tuned signal, refined over centuries from an actual diagnosed illness into one of the most psychologically useful emotions you have. The sweetness reminds you that connection and meaning are real and reachable. The bitterness reminds you that they were worth having in the first place, worth enough to leave a mark when they passed. A song comes on, one you haven't heard in years, and this time, instead of wondering why it hurts a little, you let both feelings sit there together exactly as they were built to. Proof that something in your life mattered enough to ache over.